Howdy, folks. Welcome once again. This is your wealth doctor, Jeff Camarda, along with super CFP Anna Wonderlick. And today we're talking about year-end, really any time, but, certainly New Year's resolution kind of things for what retirees and pre-retirees should do to prepare for the year ahead. So here are some critical things. The first to be aware of is the market, sure has been on a tear for a long time. And I presume it will be when you actually view this, but you want to take these lofty valuations with a grain of salt because as we've heard forever, what goes up must go down, and we've been going up for a really, really long time. But beyond that, some of the advice is a little more evergreen. It makes sense to consider consolidating accounts, right? And what are some of the reasons? And if you've got, accounts at XYZ brokerage, and I got a 401k with my employer, and I got some cash value life insurance, and I got some money at E-Trade and so forth, how do you keep up with all that stuff, right?
Well, it's impossible, especially if you're not a financially minded person. I'll use an example. One time I was working with a new client, and they had 5 401ks from different jobs spread out. One was their current employer. They're telling me, I think I'm, moderately, invested. By the time we get the statements, they had $150,000 of their nest egg sitting in cash. Huh? And it had been like that for years, and they just hadn't checked it. So, it was a no-brainer to consolidate it so that it's being looked over. It's all invested the same, which is very important. And again, constantly allocated.
When you say invested the same, you mean you have a consolidated plan and all the pieces, match each other.
Correct, right? Yeah. You're not investing a certain way with, this account and then this other account's way too aggressive, right? Consolidation is extremely important.
Just so you've got everything, in one place, and that's something we're real big on, and we think we're really good at it. Mm-hmm. But so you can see everything on one piece of paper, as it were, and what the interrelationships are. And gee whiz, there's too much cash here. Or you know what, we've got, too much in this one stock because it's in the 3 accounts of this brokerage and this brokerage and this brokerage. And to really get the big picture so it can be, risk controlled and more synergistically managed. When folks, spread their money around different firms, they often confuse that with diversification. Is that diversification?
No.
It's obfuscation. Why is it not diversification, Anna?
Because likely a lot of the firms are holding similar funds that do similar things, right? So just because you have funds in a Fidelity S&P 500 funds and you have money in a Vanguard S&P 500 fund, they're probably invested in the same underlying thing. They almost
certainly are identical, right?
Yes. And again, you're better off kind of consolidating to one place where then you can be diversified properly into different funds.
Yeah. And one of the problems also with having multiple advisors or brokerage accounts is people kind of lose sight of important things like rebalancing, tax reporting, and performance. Would you say that it's a law of the universe that most people overestimate their performance?
Absolutely.
They think they're doing better than they are.
Yeah, because they're not looking at it.
Or they don't know what to look at, or their advisor is saying, oh, we're up 30%. And he's just, maybe he didn't even look, or maybe he's got an ulterior motive. But when you have more than one vendor doing the weighted portfolio performance tracking is beyond the skill of most investors and probably beyond the skill of most advisors. It's a complicated problem. And having one platform that actually gives you, as ours does, using the, statements that give you time weighted return, internal rate of return, net of fees, and so forth that are really transparent and accurate is very, very powerful. But having stuff piecemealed all about, nobody knows, not even the advisors. Another thing that the article says that if you're comfortable, juggling accounts off of different platforms or think that you are, likely your family isn't. So if something happens to you, if your spouse or kids need to take over, it can be a real mess. And I'm sure you got a couple of horror stories you'd like to share.
Yeah, I mean, handwritten account numbers that, a child finds years later. I had that happen. They were happy to find it, but then they had to redo probate because they found this account that they didn't know existed. It's just
and the opportunity cost that could have been sitting in cash at a bank somewhere. Fortunately, they found it before it was turned over to the state of Florida or Wyoming or whatever, which is what happens. If they can't find the owner, there's a legal obligation. It is cheats to the state,
Yes.
which we don't know who it belongs to. We have to give it to the government. They
Yeah.
can't keep it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's and again, then you have people grieving your passing, right? Which is already itself so emotionally taxing. And then they're spending all of this time that they should be with family and loved ones. And they're dealing with calling all these firms and doing all the different paperwork to try and figure out where everything is.
Yeah. And we've had, kids call Gee Whiz, they have an account with us and someplace else, where's the life insurance? I go, we don't know. If you've got, a dispersion of different vendors and advisors that don't communicate, we believe in total wealth care consolidation and, and putting everything together so you have one big picture. Not all firms do that. Stuff just gets lost, which costs the family, a lot of time and grief and frequently a lot of money. Another misconception is, gee whiz, if I have all the money in one brokerage firm like Schwab, who we use, Schwab Institutional, that it's not protected. And one thing which this article I think really makes a mistake on, they're comparing SIPC insurance, which is what protects brokerage firms, and FDIC insurance, which is bank insurance, which are different. SIPC basically ensures that if they lose your securities, they'll make them up. If the securities are worthless, you're getting worthless securities. That's what the insurance is. It's not a dollar amount. But still, there's plenty of insurance. I think SIPC, Securities Investment Protection Corporation, the article says is $500,000 per account type. Most firms buy private insurance to the millions, right?
Yeah, through like Lloyd's of London or those other types of those firms. They all have it.
Yeah. So having very, very large balances with one brokerage house, is not, that doesn't exacerbate the risk. But having it all over the place, it may exacerbate the risk because you really don't know what the overall risk tolerance is and how things balance. Use Anna's example from before. I could have 5 different S&P 500 funds, with different brokerage, but it's all the same stuff. When the S&P 500 tanks, they're all going down. There isn't. It's an illusion of diversification. So it's better, having everything in one place helps you to understand what you have and how things are balanced as the asset mix, tuned for what your goals and your preferences are, and is it being tended with professional guidance to make sure it stays that way. Because if it's not tended like a garden, weeds sprout up all over the place, and what may have been a beautiful plant to begin with really just becomes an ugly profusion of foliage. The last thing to think about, since we mentioned index funds, we'll not spend too much time on this episode, but maybe in a future one. One of the concerns these days with index funds is they are super concentrated in technology, and particularly in just a handful of really valuable tech stocks. Would you like to expand on that, madam?
Yeah. So I'll use the S&P 500, but same for the NASDAQ and the other indexes, right? They look at, when they build these funds, they look at the market capitalization of these companies to make up the funds. And since, the Magnificent Seven, NVIDIA, Apple, Google have grown so much in their market cap and how much they make up of the S&P 500 index, now you have some of these companies that'll be, 7, 8, 9% of the index. And if they have an issue, right, there's an overvaluation, there's a bubble, there's news item that causes them to correct, it's going to pull the index down a lot more than 5, 10 years previously.
Yeah, and let me translate, from your lofty, fine financial mind, what, market cap means. So if we have an index, say, of 2 stocks, A and B, and they start out each worth $1, right? So you've diversified 50-50 in each stock. Now stock A goes to $10, stock B stays at $1, okay? You still own 2 stocks, but, a 10 of the $11 is now concentrated in stock A. That's what she's talking about. And right now, the S&P 500, even though it's 500 names, like half the value's in 7 stocks.
Yes.
And most of the rest is in technology stocks anyway, because technology, drives everything these days. So that really is a false sense of diversification by looking at, the number of names in the S&P 500.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of problems with index funds that we'll tear into maybe in a future episode, but that's a pretty important one. Any other, year-end or I guess annual reviews that retirees or pre-retirees should make, as they tune up their planning?
Yeah.
What do you do? Like Q, what when you're looking, and across the year, You have specific financial planning and wealth counsel agendas each quarter.
Yeah.
So kind of what do you do each quarter, and how do you keep things together?
Yeah, I mean, so beginning of the year, right? That's where we kind of review where everything is sitting. We take new, fresh data, right? Everything from what's the goal, has anything changed? We look at the portfolios and the risk. Let's say a client's like, hey, I want to retire this year. Well, we're going to go and we're going to reevaluate your risk tolerance because it's probably changing if you're making that big of a decision. And then we need to see if the way the portfolios are set up and allocated makes sense, or we need to make adjustments because of that. The article also talks about, if one sector of the market's doing really well for a year or two, they might, have increased their portion of the portfolio too much and need to be kind of reallocated back to a baseline. So that's usually what we do in the first quarter, and then throughout the year, touch on other planning topics.
Yeah, so in Q2, it's retirement, financial planning, build up, refresh your time plan, look at your retirement plan. It gets old fast, like everything changes all the time in life. And if this is your flight path, and you're in an airplane and flight plan, and then the storms, intercede, or you lose an engine, or you're low on fuel, or the airport's closed. You got to constantly adjust, and so each year we look at that and fine tune it to keep you on track where you want to go. And at Q3, I think, is estate planning and beneficiaries line up to make sure everything, laws change, your wishes change, people die, to make sure everything is lined up properly. And in Q4 is, let's see,
risk
year-end tax planning,
asset protection, and
and RMD planning and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then it's on to Q1. So you're having a robust process to keep you on track can make a huge difference in the outcomes.
Yeah.
Any concluding remarks, Madam Super CFP?
I mean, what I'll say, and I have conversations with clients about this a lot, right? Because, maybe they have a play account or something like that, and they've bought a NASDAQ fund or one stock, NVIDIA, right? And they're like, oh my gosh, it's killing it. It's been so good for a couple years. Why don't we add a large chunk of it to the portfolio? And this talks about why not. You don't want to be extra, concentrated in a certain position. There's certain years where certain sectors of the market do better than others, and that's why you have to be disciplined. When we say this is how we're going to invest your funds, we have to stick with that. Even if tech is doing really, really well, tech might do bad in a few years. I don't have a crystal ball, but historically, it's probably going to happen, and we want you diversified in other places so that you don't feel the impact of having all of your eggs in one basket.
Could be devastating. Actually, I think that's a good point to leave it. You may remember back in, in ancient days, the dot-com bust, 2000, 2003, tech stocks went down nearly 80% and took 15 years to recover. And in the middle 2020s now, tech stocks are valued about the same levels. In a sobering piece in the Wall Street Journal last week, remember Cisco?
Mm-hmm.
Cisco, which was one of the real high flyers back then, went down big time. It's been 25 years or so, and it's finally broken even from the lofty heights that it was at. So diversification, attention, and risk control protocols really can save the day, because nothing goes up forever, right?
Absolutely.
All right. Anything else?
No.
Well, thank you so much, Anna. Thank you all so much for watching. Until next time, this is Dr. Jeff Camarda Anna Wonderlick, Super CFP. See ya.